The real gift will be when this old burden finally moves to a retirement home." Those were the words my daughter-in-law said about me on Mother's Day as she blocked me from taking my seat at the family table. For 25 years, I'd sacrificed everything for my son, including $250,000 for their dream house. What I did next shocked everyone, including myself. I'm Eleanor, and within 12 months, my entire life transformed in ways I never imagined possible. Stay until the end to discover how one devastating moment led to my greatest triumph. You won't believe what happened when I finally stood up for myself after decades of silence. Comment your city below. I'm curious how far this story of reclaiming your power at any age has reached. I stood in my kitchen that Sunday morning, carefully arranging a bouquet of fresh peonies in a crystal vase, a Mother's Day gift for Vanessa, my daughter-in-law. The sunshine streamed through my window, glinting off the hand-painted porcelain tea set I'd splurged on for her, despite my limited pension. At 62, I still believed in building bridges, in finding that perfect gesture that might finally warm the frost between us. My phone buzzed with a text from my son Michael. "Change of plans for today, Mom." Something in those 6 words made my stomach tighten. I called him immediately. "What's going on, honey?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. Michael hesitated. "Vanessa thought it would be better to keep Mother's Day small this year, just immediate family." My hand froze midair. "But I am immediate family." "You know what she means, Mom," he replied, his voice dropping. "Just us, the kids, and Vanessa's parents." I gripped the counter edge, steadying myself. "Her parents are coming, but I'm not welcome." "They're staying the weekend," Michael explained hurriedly. "It's just easier this way. Vanessa's been stressed with all the renovations we've been doing. The renovations on the house I had helped them purchase. The house whose mortgage I'd been covering since Michael lost his job in the tech industry 18 months ago. The house that was draining my retirement fund month after month." "I see," I managed, though I didn't. "Well, I could just drop by briefly. I have gifts for Vanessa and the children." "Mom, please," Michael sounded exasperated. "Don't make this difficult." After we hung up, I stared at the peonies, remembering how my late husband Thomas had planted them in our garden 30 years ago. "They'll come back every spring," he'd promised, "even when everything else seems barren." I gathered the gifts, deciding to drop them off anyway. What harm could it do? I wouldn't even go inside. Thomas died when Michael was just 11, leaving me a widow at 37 with a heartbroken child and a mountain of debt. I had no family to turn to. My parents were gone, and my only sister lived abroad with little interest in our lives. It was just Michael and me against the world. I took on 2 jobs, administrative assistant by day, waitress by night, to keep our modest home and put food on the table. While other women my age were building careers or enjoying their families, I was juggling work schedules and helping with homework between shifts. I never missed a parent-teacher conference or baseball game, even if it meant functioning on 3 hours of sleep. College was the dream Thomas and I had shared for Michael. I took out a second mortgage to make it happen, postponing thoughts of my own retirement. During those years, I turned down 2 marriage proposals from decent men. My focus remained singular, providing Michael with the opportunities his father would have wanted for him. In his senior year at university, Michael met Vanessa. She was studying business administration, confident and ambitious. I was thrilled that my son had found someone so driven. What I didn't recognize then were the calculating looks she gave our modest home when they visited, the subtle questions about my finances, the way she measured everything and everyone by their material worth. Their wedding was the first red flag. Vanessa insisted on an extravagant ceremony at a vineyard estate. When I gently suggested something aligned with their actual budget, she looked at me as if I'd suggested they marry in a barn. "This is our special day," she'd said, eyes narrowed. "Don't you want Michael to have the best?" Of course I did. So I cashed out what remained of my 401k, accepting the penalties, to give them the wedding of Vanessa's dreams. My gift, financial security sacrificed for a single day of luxury. After they married, the invitations to dinner grew scarce. When I did visit, Vanessa found reasons to cut visits short, Sudden migraines, forgotten appointments, children who mysteriously became overtired the moment I arrived. Yet when they needed financial help, suddenly I was family again. I parked down the street from Michael and Vanessa's two-story colonial that Mother's Day, my gift bags clutched in hand. The house sat quiet, no sign of the family gathering I'd been excluded from. Perhaps they were still preparing, or maybe they'd gone out for brunch first. As I approached their front porch, intending to leave the gifts with a note, I heard Vanessa's voice floating through an open window. "No, Mom, don't worry about her showing up. I made sure Michael told her to stay away." I froze, gift bags clutched to my chest. "She's not invited this year," Vanessa continued, her laugh brittle in the spring air. "Or any year if I have my way." A pause. I should have left, should have retreated to my car with my dignity intact. But my feet remained rooted to the spot. "You know what would be the real Mother's Day gift?" Vanessa's voice dripped with contempt. "When that old burden finally moves to a retirement home, that would be cause for celebration." The gift bag slipped from my fingers. The beautiful tea set shattered on the concrete path, fragments scattering like my illusions about my place in my son's family. I barely noticed the sharp pain as a porcelain shard sliced my finger when I bent to gather the pieces. That old burden. I drove home in a daze, tears blurring the familiar streets. Inside my small bungalow, I collapsed onto the sofa, Vanessa's words echoing in my mind. For years, I'd made excuses for her behavior. She was stressed. She came from a different background. She needed time to warm up to me. I'd swallowed her snide remarks at family gatherings, pretended not to notice when she accidentally excluded me from family photos, convinced myself that if I just kept trying, kept giving, she would eventually accept me. All while I continued supporting them financially, paying their mortgage, contributing to my grandchildren's education funds, going without basic comforts so they could have luxuries. My gaze fell on my checkbook sitting on the coffee table. The mortgage payment for their house, $2,400, more than half my monthly income, was due the following week. I'd already written the check, waiting to mail it. With trembling fingers, I picked it up and tore it in half. Then I called my bank and placed a stop payment order on all future checks to the mortgage company. "Are you sure, Mrs. Bennett?" the representative asked. "This is a recurring payment you've been making for over a year." "I'm absolutely certain," I replied, my voice steadier than I'd felt in years. "That payment stops today." 3 days passed without a word from Michael or Vanessa. 3 days of jumping whenever my phone rang, of rehearsing what I would say when they finally called. 3 days of questioning whether I'd made the right decision. I was sorting through old photo albums when my doorbell rang. Michael stood on my porch, his face a mask of barely controlled panic. "Mom," he began without preamble, "there's some mistake with the mortgage payment." I stepped aside to let him in, noting how he didn't kiss my cheek or ask how I was, our usual greeting replaced by financial urgency. "It's not a mistake," I said once we were seated in my living room. "I've decided not to make the payments anymore." Michael stared at me as if I'd suddenly started speaking a foreign language. "You can't do that." "Actually, I can. It's my money." "But we had an agreement." His voice rose. "You said you'd help us." That was before I heard what Vanessa really thinks of me. The words tumbled out before I could stop them. Before I found out I was uninvited from Mother's Day while her parents were welcome. Before I heard your wife say that me moving to a retirement home would be a real gift. Michael's face paled. "You were eavesdropping on us." The accusation stung. "No, Michael, I came to drop off gifts and Vanessa was talking loudly enough for the neighbors to hear." "She didn't mean it," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "She was just stressed." "About what? What have I ever done except give until there's nothing left for me?" Michael ran his hand through his hair, a gesture so like his father's that my heart ached despite my anger. "Mom, we need that money. We can't make the payment without it." "Then sell the house, Michael. Get something you can actually afford." "We can't do that now." Panic edged his words. "The market's down and the kids' school, those are your choices to make," I replied. surprised at my own firmness. But I won't be paying anymore. Is this blackmail? His voice turned cold. You're using money to punish us because your feelings got hurt? Something broke inside me. After everything I'd sacrificed, everything I'd given up, my son thought I was being petty. This isn't about punishment, Michael, I said, my voice trembling but steady. It's about respect. I've spent my entire life putting you first. I went without so you could have what you needed. I'm 62 years old with barely enough saved for my own future because I gave everything to you. And in return, you let your wife treat me like I'm nothing. That's not fair. No, it isn't fair. None of this is fair, but I'm done. I paused, gathering strength. I love you, Michael. I always will. But I won't set myself on fire to keep you and Vanessa warm anymore. The confrontation with Michael was just the beginning. 2 days later, both he and Vanessa showed up at my door unannounced. We need to resolve this, Michael said, his tone conciliatory while Vanessa stood behind him, arms crossed, eyes cold. In my living room, I offered them tea out of habit. Vanessa declined with a dismissive wave. Look, she said, cutting straight to the point. This little tantrum about Mother's Day needs to stop. We have a mortgage payment due. Vanessa, Michael cautioned, but she pressed on. After everything we've done for you, she continued, her voice dripping with false sincerity. You're being incredibly selfish. I couldn't help it. I laughed. It was so absurd, so completely backward. What exactly have you done for me, Vanessa? Besides take my money and keep me from my family? I've tolerated you, she snapped, her veneer cracking. Do you have any idea how tiresome it is having you hover around, always wanting attention? Vanessa, that's enough, Michael interjected, looking horrified. No, it's not enough, she shot back. Your mother has been manipulating you for years with her guilt trips and her checkbook. Well, we don't need her. We kind of do need her checkbook right now, Michael said quietly, and something inside me broke. My own son, admitting that my value to them was purely financial. Vanessa turned back to me, her voice suddenly honeyed. Eleanor, we all say things we don't mean when we're upset. Let's put this behind us. The mortgage payment is no longer my responsibility, I replied firmly. Neither are you. Vanessa's facade crumbled completely. You smug, self-righteous old woman. Do you think Michael would even visit you if you weren't paying our bills? Do you think the kids would care about their grandmother if you weren't bringing them expensive gifts? Michael stared at his wife in horror. Vanessa, stop. No, let her continue, I said, a strange calm washing over me. Let her tell the truth for once. Vanessa laughed bitterly. The truth? The truth is you've been buying your way into our lives because you have nothing else to offer, no one else to burden with your neediness. And now you're throwing a tantrum because you finally realized we've been using you. The silence that followed was absolute. Michael looked like he'd been struck. Vanessa's chest heaved with anger. And I felt oddly liberated. Thank you for your honesty, I said, my voice steady. Now I'd like you both to leave. Mom, Michael began, but I held up my hand. I've heard enough. We have nothing more to discuss. Vanessa grabbed her purse. Fine, come on, Michael. Michael hesitated, torn between wife and mother. Michael now! Vanessa's voice was a whip. Before stepping out, he turned back. I didn't know, Mom, about how she felt. I swear. Whether I believed him or not no longer mattered. When the door closed behind them, I sank onto my sofa, trembling not with sadness, but with a fierce, unexpected sense of freedom. The masks had fallen. Now it was time to see what lay beneath. The weeks following that confrontation passed in a strange limbo. I moved through my days mechanically, grocery shopping, preparing simple meals for one, watching television programs I barely registered. The silence of my phone was deafening. No calls from Michael, no pictures of my grandchildren, no demands for money. The silence hurt, but less than I expected. There was a curious freedom in it too, like removing a too-tight shoe I'd grown so accustomed to I'd forgotten it was causing pain. Sleep eluded me most nights. I'd lie awake, replaying the confrontation, questioning my decision. Had I been too harsh? Should I have found another way? What would happen to my relationship with my grandchildren? 8-year-old Sophie and 10-year-old Mason, who were innocent in all this. One morning, I found myself driving past Michael and Vanessa's house. It was a compulsion I couldn't explain. The perfectly manicured lawn now showed signs of neglect. A for sale sign stood in the front yard, confirming what I'd suspected. Without my financial support, they couldn't maintain their lifestyle. I felt a pang of guilt, quickly followed by anger at myself for feeling it. Why was I programmed to feel responsible for grown adults who had shown me nothing but disrespect? At home, I pulled out my financial records. For years, I'd been so focused on helping Michael that I'd neglected my own security. My retirement account was dangerously depleted. If I continued on this path, I'd be working well into my 70s, or worse, becoming truly dependent on a son who saw me as a burden. With trembling hands, I made an appointment with a financial advisor, something I should have done years ago. "We have work to do," she told me bluntly after reviewing my situation. "But it's not hopeless. The payments you were making on their mortgage, if redirected to your retirement fund and some conservative investments, could make a significant difference in your future security." For the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. Not just financial hope, but the possibility of a life reclaimed. The next day, I stood in front of my hall closet, a space I'd been avoiding. Inside were boxes of art supplies, brushes, paints, sketchbooks, remnants of a passion I'd abandoned after Thomas died. There had been no time for art when survival took all my energy. I pulled out a sketch pad, feeling its weight in my hands. The last drawing was dated 2 weeks before Thomas's death, a landscape of the park where we'd often picnicked with young Michael. I traced the lines with my fingertip, remembering how Thomas had looked over my shoulder as I worked, how he'd kissed my temple and whispered, "You see the world so beautifully." When had I stopped seeing beauty? When had I stopped seeing myself? With sudden resolve, I cleared a space at my kitchen table and opened a new page. My first strokes were hesitant, rusty from decades of disuse. But gradually, as the afternoon light shifted across my small kitchen, something inside me remembered. Something woke up. I was weeding my small front garden one Wednesday afternoon when a bicycle skidded to a halt at my curb. Looking up, I was startled to see Mason, my grandson, his helmet askew, his face flushed with exertion. "Mason!" I gasped, pulling him into a hug. "What are you doing here? Does your father know where you are?" He shook his head, his eyes brimming with confusion and hurt. "Dad and Mom are fighting all the time about the house and about you. I heard Dad tell Mom that the bank might take our house away." My heart sank. So it had begun, the foreclosure proceedings I'd anticipated but still dreaded for my grandchildren's sake. "I miss you, Grandma," Mason said, his voice small. "Mom said you didn't want to see us anymore, but I knew that wasn't true." I led him into the kitchen and set about making his favorite, hot chocolate with extra marshmallows despite the warm spring day. Some situations demanded comfort food. "Your mother wasn't telling the truth," I said gently, setting the mug before him. "I've missed you and Sophie terribly." Mason nodded, sipping his cocoa. "Dad's really sad all the time. He lost his job again last week. Mom keeps crying about the house." So that was why Michael hadn't reached out. On top of the mortgage trouble, he'd lost his job again, the third time in 6 years. The tech industry could be brutal, especially for someone in his 40s. "Are you and Dad fighting?" Mason asked, his eyes wide with worry. "Is that why you're not helping with our house anymore?" I took a deep breath, considering how to explain adult complexities to a child. "Your dad and I have a disagreement about respect, about how family members should treat each other." "Is it because Mom's mean to you?" Mason asked bluntly. "I heard her tell Aunt Rachel that you were a controlling witch who needed to mind your own business." I nearly choked on my tea, out of the mouths of babes. "It's complicated, sweetheart," I said finally. "But I want you to know that none of this is your fault, and I love you and Sophie very much." When I called Michael to let him know Mason was with me, his relief was palpable. "I'll come get him right away," he said, his voice tight. "Let him stay for dinner," I suggested. I'll bring him home after. A pause. Vanessa won't like that. Vanessa doesn't have to know, I replied, surprised at my own boldness. Mason came to me, Michael. He's worried about you two fighting all the time. Another longer pause. Fine, but I'll pick him up at 7. I need to talk to you anyway. Michael arrived just after 7, looking exhausted. Mason ran to hug him, chattering about the cookies we'd baked and how I'd let him help plant new flowers in my garden. Go wait in the car, buddy, Michael said finally. I need to talk to Grandma. When he was gone, Michael stood awkwardly in my living room, hands in his pockets, just as he had weeks ago. But something had changed. The anger was gone, replaced by a bone-deep weariness. You lost your job, I said. It wasn't a question, he nodded. Budget cuts. They laid off 15% of the staff. He hesitated. And the house. We missed 2 payments. The bank sent a formal notice. If we don't catch up within 30 days, they'll start foreclosure. After Michael left with Mason, I sat in my garden as dusk fell, watching fireflies emerge among my rose bushes. The visit had left me conflicted, concerned for my grandchildren caught in the middle of adult problems, yet still resolute about maintaining my boundaries. The next morning, I woke with an unexpected lightness. For the first time in years, my day was entirely my own. No checks to write for someone else's mortgage, no grandchildren to pick up from activities while Vanessa had her hair done, no apologizing for taking up space in my son's life. I opened my sketchbook, now filled with a week's worth of drawings, mostly still lifes and garden scenes, nothing ambitious. But today felt different. I set up my easel by the window and began to paint with watercolors, something I hadn't attempted since college. My first efforts were disappointing, colors bleeding together, proportions off. But instead of the crushing self-criticism that had once characterized my approach to art, I found myself laughing at the mistakes. Well, Eleanor, I said aloud, no one's expecting a masterpiece. That simple acknowledgement that I could create for joy rather than perfection unlocked something. I started again, more playfully this time, letting the colors flow where they wanted. By afternoon, I had a passable painting of my garden view, not gallery-worthy, but alive with color and light. On impulse, I looked up local art classes. The community center offered watercolor for beginners on Tuesday evenings. Before I could talk myself out of it, I signed up and paid the modest fee. Have you painted before? Asked the instructor, a silver-haired woman named Marianne at the first class. A lifetime ago, I admitted. She smiled, assessing my tentative brushstrokes. The muscle memory is there, just needs awakening. By the end of the 2-hour session, I had connected with 2 other women near my age, Judith, a retired librarian, and Patricia, a widow of 3 years. When they invited me for coffee afterward, I surprised myself by saying yes. How long has it been since you did something just for yourself? Patricia asked as we settled into a corner table at the cafe. The question caught me off guard. I'm not sure I ever have, I admitted, realizing the truth of it as the words left my mouth. Welcome to the 3rd act, Judith said, raising her cup in a toast. The part where we finally become the protagonists of our own lives. That phrase stayed with me as I drove home, as I prepared for bed, as I lay awake thinking about my son, my grandchildren, and the house that had become both symbol and battleground, the protagonist of my own life. For so long, I'd been a supporting character in everyone else's story. Devoted wife, sacrificing mother, ATM machine with a heartbeat. What would it mean to step into the center of my own narrative? To make choices based not on what others needed from me, but on what brought me joy, purpose, fulfillment? The next morning, I called my financial advisor again. I want to explore taking a drawing course at the local college, I told her. Is that something my budget can handle? Let me see, she replied, and I could hear the smile in her voice. I think we can make room for that investment in yourself. Investment in myself. Another revolutionary concept after decades of investing everything in others. 3 weeks after Mason's surprise visit, Michael called to arrange a meeting. Just to talk, he assured me. No ambushes this time. We met at a neutral location, a cafe halfway between our homes. Michael arrived alone, I noticed immediately. No Vanessa to steer the conversation or make cutting remarks disguised as jokes. "Thank you for coming," he said, oddly formal as we settled at a corner table. Up close, I could see the strain of recent weeks etched on his face. New lines around his eyes, a tightness in his jaw. "How are the children?" I asked. "Missing you," he admitted. "Sophie asks about you every day." A pang of longing shot through me. I miss them too. Michael nodded, fidgeting with his coffee cup. I noticed he wasn't wearing his wedding ring. "Vanessa and I are separating," he said finally, the words rushing out as if he'd been holding them back. "She's moving in with her sister in Portland while we figure things out." Despite everything, my heart ached for my son. "I'm sorry, Michael." He looked up, surprised. "Are you?" "Of course I am. I never wanted your marriage to fail. I just wanted to be treated with basic respect." He had the grace to look ashamed. "The house is officially in foreclosure. We couldn't make the payments, especially after I lost my job. We're selling, but we'll barely break even in this market." I said nothing, waiting. There was more coming. I could sense it. "I've been looking at apartments, 2 bedrooms so the kids can stay with me when it's my turn to have them." He took a deep breath. "Vanessa wants primary custody." "And what do you want?" The question seemed to startle him. I want what's best for the kids, of course." "That's not what I asked, Michael. What do you want?" He stared at his coffee, then met my eyes directly for the first time. "I want joint custody, equal time. They need stability, especially now." I nodded, proud of him for this small assertion of what he valued, rather than what Vanessa dictated. "There's something else," he continued. "I found a box in Vanessa's closet while I was packing. Birthday cards, Christmas gifts, all from you to the kids, unopened." His voice broke. "Years' worth. She kept them all. Said she was protecting the children from my manipulative mother." My hands trembled as I set down my cup. All those carefully chosen gifts, the notes I'd written with love, hidden away, never reaching their intended recipients. "I swear I didn't know," Michael whispered. "I thought the kids just didn't care about writing thank you notes. I should have checked. I should have noticed." "Yes," I agreed softly. "You should have." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of years of misunderstandings between us. "I don't expect you to bail us out again," Michael said finally. "I don't have the right to ask that, but I don't want to lose you. The kids need their grandmother, and His voice caught. "I need my mom. Need, not want." The words struck me. All these years, I'd been needed for what I could provide. Money, childcare, emotional support. Always giving, rarely receiving. "I've started taking art classes," I said, changing the subject. "Something I loved before I was married, before you were born. I'd forgotten how much joy it brought me." Michael looked startled, then thoughtful. "Dad always said you were talented. He had that landscape you painted hung in his office." The memory touched me. Thomas had believed in my art even when I'd set it aside for more practical concerns. "I'm making different choices now," I told him. "Choices that honor what I need and want, not just what others expect from me." A month after our cafe meeting, Michael called again. His voice held an excitement I hadn't heard in years. "I got a job offer," he announced. "Not in tech this time. A management position with a publishing company. Less money than I was making before, but steady. And they have great family leave policies." "That's wonderful, Michael," I said, genuinely happy for him. "When do you start?" 2 weeks. And I found an apartment, nothing fancy, but in a good school district so the kids can stay in their school. It's a fresh start." The conversation flowed more easily than it had in years. We talked about the children, about his new job prospects, about the art exhibition where one of my watercolors would be displayed. Then, just as we were about to hang up, he hesitated. "Mom, there's something else. The security deposit for the apartment. It's substantial. With the foreclosure and everything, My credit isn't great right now, so they're asking for first and last month's rent plus 2 months security. I was wondering, and there it was. The test I'd been both expecting and dreading. The old pattern reasserting itself. Michael in need, Eleanor the safety net. 6 months ago, I would have said yes without hesitation, would have written the check before he'd finished asking, would have sacrificed my own security for his comfort. I can't help with that, Michael, I said quietly. Oh. His disappointment was palpable over the phone. I understand. It was wrong of me to ask after everything. It's not wrong to ask, I clarified, but it would be wrong of me to say yes. Because you're still angry? A hint of the old defensiveness crept into his voice. Because I'm finally taking care of myself, I corrected gently. My financial advisor has helped me create a plan to secure my own future. A future where I won't have to depend on anyone else for support. Breaking that plan would be breaking a promise to myself. The silence stretched between us, tense with unspoken emotions. There are other options, I continued. Have you looked into whether your new employer offers relocation assistance? Or perhaps a loan from your 401k? I hadn't thought of those, he admitted. I guess I automatically turned to you. That's been the pattern, hasn't it? Yes, I agreed. It has been. But patterns can change, Michael. People can change. I have. After we hung up, I sat in my garden, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. A complex mixture of emotions washed through me. Pride in my newfound strength, concern for my son, hope that our relationship could evolve into something healthier for us both. That evening, I attended my watercolor class, then joined Judith, Patricia, and our newest friend Carmen for our weekly dinner. As we shared stories and laughter over pasta and wine, I realized with a start that I was happy, genuinely happy in a way I hadn't been in decades. To Eleanor, Judith raised her glass in a toast, who reminded all of us that it's never too late to become who you might have been. Later that night, I received a text from Michael. You were right. HR offers relocation assistance, all set with the apartment. Proud of you, Mom. Those 3 words, proud of you, brought tears to my eyes. For the first time in our adult relationship, Michael was seeing me as a person in my own right, not just as his mother, his support system, his financial backup plan. I'd held firm to my boundaries, and rather than destroying our relationship, it had created space for something new to grow. As autumn painted the leaves in brilliant reds and golds, I found myself standing nervously in the community center's gallery space, surrounded by my watercolors. The local art association had organized a showcase of student work, and my instructor Marianne had insisted I submit 3 pieces. You have a distinctive eye, she'd told me. Your work deserves to be seen. Now, watching strangers pause before my paintings, a series of garden scenes through changing seasons, I felt a curious mixture of vulnerability and pride. This was my vision, my perspective on the world, offered up for others to experience. Grandma! Sophie's voice cut through the murmur of the gallery. She raced toward me, Mason close behind, both launching themselves into my arms. Michael followed more sedately, looking surprisingly polished in a sport coat. Sorry we're late, he said, kissing my cheek. Traffic was worse than I expected. You're here, I replied, hugging my grandchildren close. That's all that matters. The past 6 months had brought gradual healing to our fractured relationship. Michael and the children now lived in a modest apartment that he could afford on his publishing salary. Vanessa had decided to stay in Portland permanently, having met someone new. Joint custody had been arranged, with the children spending alternate weeks with each parent. Michael led the children to my display. These are Grandma's paintings, he explained. What do you think? You made these? Mason asked, eyes wide with amazement. I nodded, warmed by his reaction. They're beautiful, Sophie declared with the absolute certainty of a 9-year-old. Can you teach me how to paint like that? I'd love to, I told her. We could start next weekend when you visit. After viewing the exhibition, we walked to a nearby restaurant for dinner. As we waited for our food, Michael handed me an envelope. "What's this?" I asked. "Open it," he urged. Inside was a check, not for the full amount I'd contributed to their mortgage over the years, but substantial nonetheless. "Michael, you don't have to—" "Yes, I do," he interrupted firmly. "It's not everything, but it's a start. I've set up a payment plan. Each month I'll transfer some amount to your account. It might take years, but I'm going to pay you back." I was speechless, touched not just by the money, but by the recognition of what my support had meant, and what it had cost me. "I also want you to have this," he continued, placing a small box on the table. Inside was a key. "It's to my apartment," Michael explained. "I want you to be able to come and go as you please. No more scheduled visits or asking permission. Your family, real family." "Thank you," I whispered, my vision blurring with tears. Later that evening, after dropping Michael and the children at their apartment, I returned home to find an email from the gallery. One of my paintings had sold. The amount was modest, but the validation was priceless. Someone had valued my perspective enough to want it in their home. As I prepared for bed, I caught sight of my reflection in the bathroom mirror. The woman looking back at me was changed from the one who had stood sobbing in her kitchen on Mother's Day a year ago. There was a confidence in her posture, a clarity in her eyes. She was no longer defined solely by what she gave to others, but by what she had discovered within herself. My phone pinged with a text from Judith. "Congratulations on your sale. Celebration breakfast tomorrow?" I smiled, typing back a quick, "Absolutely." My circle of friends had grown, becoming a support system I never knew I needed. Martha, Patricia, Judith, Carmen, women who saw me as Eleanor, not just as Michael's mother or Thomas's widow. Women who valued my thoughts, my humor, my company without expecting anything in return. In my bedroom, I glanced at the framed photograph on my nightstand. Thomas and me on our wedding day, young and full of dreams. "You'd be proud," I whispered to his image. Not of what I gave up, but of what I finally claimed for myself. I'd spent decades believing that love meant limitless sacrifice, that my worth was measured by how much I could give to others. Now I understood that true love, including self-love, required boundaries, respect, and reciprocity. Tomorrow I would start a new painting. I already had the composition in mind: a phoenix rising, wings spread against a sunrise sky. Rebirth, transformation, the gift I had finally given myself. "Grandma, watch this," Sophie called, executing a wobbly cartwheel on my lawn. At 10, she was all gangly limbs and boundless energy, her dark hair flying as she tumbled through the grass. "Impressive!" I applauded from my porch, where I was setting the picnic table for our Mother's Day lunch. A year had passed since the fateful Mother's Day when everything had changed. A year of growth, healing, and rebuilding. Mason emerged from my kitchen carrying a pitcher of lemonade with exaggerated care. At 12, he was taking his role as man of the house seriously whenever he visited, insisting on helping with tasks that required strength or responsibility. "Where should I put this, Grandma?" he asked. "Right in the center of the table, sweetheart. Thank you." Michael arrived moments later, arms laden with grocery bags. "Fresh bread from that bakery you love," he announced, kissing my cheek. "And flowers, of course." He presented a colorful bouquet of daisies and sunflowers, my favorites, not the formal roses Vanessa had always insisted were the only appropriate flowers for occasions. "They're perfect," I said, burying my face in their brightness. Our relationship had evolved over the past year into something healthier, more balanced. Michael had kept his promise to make monthly repayments, never missing a single one despite the occasional financial pinch. More importantly, he had kept his promise about access to my grandchildren, making sure I was included in their lives consistently, not just when it was convenient. Vanessa remained in Portland with her new husband. The children visited her during school breaks, an arrangement that seemed to work for everyone. According to Michael, she'd become less bitter after remarrying, more capable of civility in their co-parenting relationship. As we gathered around the table for our simple feast, quiche, salad, fresh bread, and the strawberry shortcake the children had helped me prepare that morning. I looked at the faces of my family and felt a deep contentment. "Before we eat," Michael said, raising his glass, "I want to make a toast." The children solemnly raised their lemonade glasses, imitating their father. "To Mom, for teaching us what courage looks like, what self-respect means, and how to create a life that honors both." "To Grandma," the children echoed. After lunch, while Michael and the children cleaned up, another new development. In the past, Michael would have assumed I would handle all kitchen duties. I wandered into my garden. My art studio, converted from the spare bedroom where I once stored old boxes and forgotten dreams, looked out over this garden, drawing inspiration from its changing seasons. My phone buzzed with messages from my friends, wishing me a happy Mother's Day and confirming our plans for our weekly art group tomorrow. At 63, I had a fuller social calendar than I'd had in decades. Michael joined me in the garden, handing me a cup of tea. "Happy?" he asked simply. I considered the question, looking at my son who had nearly lost himself in a toxic marriage, but had found his way back to authenticity. I thought about my grandchildren, thriving despite the challenges of their parents' separation. I reflected on my own journey from doormat to woman standing firmly in her own power. "Yes," I answered truthfully, "I'm happy." We sat in comfortable silence as the spring sun warmed us. In the background, I could hear the children laughing as they played with the new puppy Michael had adopted, a rescue dog named Hope that had quickly become a symbol of their new beginning. Last week, I'd received a letter from Vanessa, the first direct communication since our confrontation. It contained a brief but seemingly genuine apology for her treatment of me over the years. I appreciated the gesture, though I had no desire to resume any close relationship. Some bridges, once burned, are better left as ashes. My latest painting waited on the easel in my studio, a commission from a local restaurant owner who had seen my work at the gallery. My first paid commission, a milestone I never imagined achieving at this stage of my life. The road hadn't been smooth. There had been lonely nights when I questioned my decisions, days when I missed the easy access to my grandchildren that financial manipulation had once bought me. Moments when standing firm felt more painful than capitulating. But with each day that passed, my resolve had strengthened, my confidence had grown, and my life had expanded in ways I couldn't have imagined. The true gift that Mother's Day a year ago wasn't the cruel words Vanessa had spoken or the painful revelations that followed. The gift was the opportunity those words created, the chance to finally choose myself, to discover that standing up for my dignity wasn't selfish but necessary, not just for me, but for everyone who claimed to love me. As the afternoon shadows lengthened, we gathered for a family walk to the park. Mason ran ahead with the puppy. Sophie skipped alongside me, chattering about her school art project inspired by my paintings, and Michael walked at a leisurely pace, more present and content than I'd seen him in years. This was my life now. Not perfect, not without its complications and ongoing challenges, but authentic. A life built on mutual respect rather than obligation or manipulation. A life where I was valued not for what I provided, but for who I was. The price of dignity had been high, but oh, how worth it.